Sam, hello. Kwesi,
Good
hello, hello, hello.
morning.
How's everyone doing?
I'm good. It's nice and
Hi.
early for us gamers.
I think I saw a post about the professionals in the CS:GO complaining about a 10 a.m. match. So I think we're there, guys. We've made it now because we are doing esports things at 10 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah, yeah.
Right, so listen, good day, everybody. And if you've just joined us, obviously, this is Comic Con Business of Gaming. And we're here to talk about esports in Africa, the good, the bad, and the ugly. Quite a nice, dramatic headline. I think just to kick things off, let's just introduce ourselves for people or viewers that might not know who we are. Nick, since you've been with me at the beginning, let's kick it off with you.
Cool. My name's Nick Holden. I'm the co-owner of African Cyber Gaming League, better known as acgl.co.za if you want to head over to that. And I also dabble in a little bit of commentary every once in a while.
Great. Sam, on to you.
So I'm a content creator. I started in the tech and geek space, moved into gaming, and in the last 3 years, I've become a full-time esports shoutcaster / commentator / host, and that's basically what I do now.
Great. Kwesi, you're up.
Okay, all right. So I'll describe myself as an esports entrepreneur and an advocate. I do a lot of stuff from kids to female gaming to trying to champion the esports space in Africa with other collaborators. I try to do everything. I game myself. I consider myself as a default as a gamer. I have my own streaming channel on Facebook, which I think I was the first person to be banned on Facebook for streaming, and it got me to get into LinkedIn, and LinkedIn became my default social media platform. So I do everything esports. I even started a startup in food for gamers. So
Wow.
I just describe myself as an
Bit of
esports
everything.
entrepreneur. Yeah, the good of it. Yeah.
Great, that's great. I mean, and for people that don't know me, I'm Glenn Kisela. I'm a creative director in advertising, but then also a creative director and co-owner of Nibble Esports. And also been writing about games for about over a decade now, from Critical Hit primarily now. So thank you everybody for taking the time to join us to talk about esports. I think I'm going to get things started and really go into the basics to kick us off. So Sam, I'll start with you. Tell us a little bit about how you got into esports.
When you say this is always an interesting one. I always played games growing up. My brother, however, was the pro gamer. So him and his friends had a little team and they competed. We had the best internet in our house, so they were always at our house playing. And that was kind of how I started following esports. At that stage, they were playing under in basements at certain events once a year. They got to win a keyboard. That was a big deal for them. And I sort of got to watch that growth with them and how they blew up. I started following that. At that stage, I was working at YFM, which is quite a popular radio station in South Africa. I had a blog where I was writing, which wasn't the blog that I have now. And I just started writing and doing coverage and interviews on certain spaces. I did some stuff for a site called H60, and I was doing esports coverage. And then slowly esports blew up, for want of a better term, in South Africa. People started paying attention. And I felt a little bit concerned because I thought, cool, it's great that all the mainstream media is making a big noise, but I don't see any longevity with the content that they're creating. They're not telling the story. So I kind of jumped in and started telling those stories. And from there, somehow just ended up at esports events every weekend. And then someone gave me a mic and now it is what it is. But yeah, that's basically how I got into it.
Yeah, no, that's great. I mean, Nick, do you want to go into your birth into esports?
Absolutely. I mean, like Sam, I started gaming at a very young age. I have two older brothers, so competitively, it was the best or fairest playing ground for me to be able to at least knock them out in a couple of games every once in a while. That led into a very competitive spirit that got born in terms of being able to take that to the Call of Duty side of things, tried to go as far as I could, realized that I was hitting a ceiling pretty quickly and decided, you know what, I want to try go into the tournament operation space. Further from that, I started a company called Clan Connection. Some of the OGs in the chat might remember that one. And from there, that got picked up by MWeb. So I got brought on essentially as one of their lead tournament operators on that side of things, where I also wrote content for them for Game Zone at the time. That further went into an
Shout
opportunity.
out to Game Zone. Okay,
Shout out to Game Zone. That further led into an opportunity to keep still hosting some events on the side, but also obviously for MWeb. And then a big opportunity fell in our lap to host essentially a CWL event. That's a Call of Duty World League event in 2016. And that's where we decided to take essentially what we had as a holding company behind the scenes at MWeb to turn that into ACGL as a more public-facing company from that end. And that was more our public-sided launch in 2016. And then essentially we've been operating our platform ever since then. We've gone on to win awards for the MTN App of the Year Awards, which was fantastic at the time. And we've continuously grown to where we have a 40,000 user base at the moment. Plus, that's still growing every single month. COVID definitely spiked that. And since then, we've been doing some cool events in between and just trying to do our part in growing the esports environment and trying to do the best that we can with a very small amount of team, but a very passionate team that we have. Also known as the ACGL family.
No, that's great. Kwesi, and yourself, and obviously for you, it's also quite an interesting, to get your perspective. And I think, well, we'll go into that a bit later, but I think obviously we're very much based in South Africa. So for you to be outside of the borders really gives us a different perspective that we don't often get to chat about. So please, how did you get into esports on your side?
Okay, so for my journey was I loved painting and graphics. Okay, so I was into movies. I was growing up as a little boy. I joined some friends to go and draw movie covers, movie posters. They were like, you go to the cinema hall and you see the poster there, and we'll lie down on our tummy and begin to start to draw. So I was really into graphics. There was a public library where my school was very close to, so we signed up, and I was into comics, Tintin, all those old comics stuff. Then that actually got me. But my esports journey started in the university. When I got to the university, there was an internet cafe there, and I got close to the owner, and I started going online, and I was seeing all this gaming, and I visited a friend of mine, and he was playing Warcraft. And I said, whoa, I needed to have that game. So what happened was my first loan. When you go to the university, the government gives you a loan, a student's loan. I used my first loan instead of taking care of myself to go and buy a PC. I mean, I just wanted to play games, not even for my own project work or for academic work. I just wanted to play games. So I went to buy a PC, and how I managed throughout the semester, I don't know. But I mean, my room became where people will come and play the games. I mean, all the games on the PC, and that's where it sparked. So it started from organizing a tournament within my roommate. Then it began to go onto the floor, the flatmate, and it led to a university thing. So after school, I joined a media and a printing firm, and my passion was still in the gaming. So I told my CEO, I still love gaming. I wanted to do something. So it gives me the liberties to, whilst working, do my gaming stuff. So on weekends, we do community hood kind of tournament between the kids in the community or the gamers in the community. So that really sparked up my interest in gaming.
Yeah, and I really love to hear the variety of how people get into esports and the different ways that people sort of stumble across it. And I mean, when you get into it, that you love it, and it's really it's great to hear the stories around that. And obviously as the heading talks about, the discussion is around the good, the bad, and the ugly. And I think there's a lot of discussions around esports. I think what's really great about this chat and what I really want to talk about is very much, the great things and also the negative things and also ways to improve it. And I think there's a lot of opportunity, especially across Africa, to really do some great things. So, I mean, Nick, I think we'll start with you. In terms of, tournament organizing and that, coming from that perspective and that background, I think we've seen a big sort of, rise and fall and a grow and an ebb and flow of esports within South Africa, at least, where the prize pool started, growing and growing to this exponential, degree, and the big stages and the flashy lights. And we've kind of seen a bit of a dip as people started to kind of bring back the money that they were putting in. win. Do you think, we are in a better place now in terms of from a tournament perspective within esports than we were, let's say, 4 years ago, 5 years ago?
In some ways, yes. I think from an infrastructure perspective, we are a little bit better off knowing that we can do more broadcast, more content creation across the board from, at our own homes where we need to. I think that's very important. I remember the days of having to drive all the way to MWeb, which took about an hour and 15 minutes, going to do a broadcast there, and then driving all the way back as well. I mean, and then you'd be coming back at 1 a.m. at night. Now you can kind of do these broadcasts from home. So it's definitely made the content creation, which is also important as essentially being able to make announcements about what you're doing, talking about it, putting the spotlight on the community, which is also so important. I think it's increased in terms of being able to put at least a couple of eyeballs in terms of the sector. I don't necessarily think that the prize pools are always going to be the most convincing way to be able to spend your money. In terms of the tournament operation space, this space really needs consistency, and it needs regular activities for these players to attach to from a structural level. And I think structurally we're getting there. It's not there just yet. And the biggest thing is we need lots of points of attachment for people to join upon that structure. At the moment, the spine of esports is still developing in South Africa. And we need to get that firmly rooted before we start building further sectors of that. And that's where we want to be able to rely on existing structures, which are the schools, are the universities, and how are they going to be able to build their way into esports. And I think they're taking that conversation very, very seriously, even more so now after the COVID period. So I think we're in the right direction. Would I like us to be 10 steps ahead? I think we all would like that, but we all have to face the very serious problems of growing pains inside an industry that it has a lot of restrictions, but at the same time, I think we're going in the right direction, and I think we're on the right road for that.
Yeah. No, and I mean, obviously, Sam, for you, I mean, it's quite a great perspective because you have that international understanding and your international experience within esports. So for you to have been, made a name for yourself here locally and done really, really amazing work, and then getting to travel overseas and see how we look, the esports scenes that we look up to, and you being involved directly in it, what has that given you in terms of that international perspective and experience when you look at sort of, ZA esports and esports within Africa as well, within an African context?
So I think being overseas allows you to understand that the player base is so much bigger. It's easier for them to access data. It's easier for them to access internet. PC cafes are common there, and they're really cheap. So a lot of kids in Europe, it's cold, it's snowing, they're in those PC cafes, whereas I think, we tend to want to be more outdoors. That is our nature. But also we have a huge socio-economic divide. So being overseas has allowed me to realize that, one, we don't have the numbers that they have overseas. And I don't think we ever will because of different things outside of our control. There is obviously a huge, big gap economically here. So we have a much smaller player base across consoles, mobile, and PC. And understanding over there, because they have such a big player base, it's a lot easier for them to run tournaments. And if you don't like it, tough luck, there'll be 70, 80 other players available for us. So we don't, overseas, they don't necessarily pander to the players. They are looking at how do we turn this into an entertainment show where we can make money from this for everyone. Whereas here, I think we don't have that player base, so we have to focus on nurturing the smaller base we have. And like Nick said, we haven't really got that spine yet. We haven't found that base of players. It's not big enough. So that coming home is, I mean, I'll be honest, when you go overseas and you see that, you come home, you feel a little bit depressed for a while. And I've spoken to a couple of other people who've done it. You kind of come home and go, wow, this is a huge mountain. Because over and above that, the one thing that they've done really well overseas, and because this is the business of gaming, I have to bring it up, they've monetized esports really well. They make a lot of money from what they do. And obviously you see it here. We kind of want to replicate that, but we have to understand some of the barriers that we have. They've figured out how to turn it into an entertainment spectacle, which is something I think we lack here. But of course, we can't get to that point where this becomes entertainment until we have a player base. So that's something that I've learned from overseas is how do we get more players, and also accepting the fact that we will never have those numbers. I think that's something that no one wants to hear, and it's a bitter pill to swallow, but we'll always be smaller. That is just the nature of where we are. But also understanding how to monetize that and not having to copy that overseas. Like Nick said, we don't need the massive prize pools and the big stages and the flashy lights. Let's figure out our own African alternative where we can monetize this in our way that works for us and works for our smaller player base.
Yeah. And I think, So you bring up a good point there in terms of the smaller player base, and the fact that we'll never have those numbers. And I think one of the big things that we find is there's a lot of fragmentation within the small pie we have already. So everybody's kind of taking little bits and pieces, and the problem is when you take bits and pieces, you can't do anything with that, as opposed to trying to find that holistic view. I mean, do you think there's a way that we'll get to a point where people start going, let's look at big picture stuff and figure out how do we make our base work for us, as opposed to everybody trying to do their own thing and ending up with a lot of little pieces as opposed to smaller big pieces that make it more sustainable?
So I think this is a difficult one because obviously within esports, esports itself is not one thing. So much like esports is a piece of gaming, within esports you have all these different titles. So it's really difficult for us to all stand and say, okay, cool, we need to put all our effort into this one title. I mean, India is a really good example of this. I'm going to talk about it later, but when PUBG Mobile got banned, that could potentially, until they can find a solution, could destroy an entire industry in like this. So is it necessary for us to put all our focus into one space? That worries me. It is very fragmented. I do think we have way too many tournament organizers. I think everyone is a tournament organizer. Everyone is a shoutcaster. Everyone is a team owner. So we considering how small we are, I think we have more tournament organizers here than some countries in Europe. But that is something to be concerned about. So I do agree. Maybe we need to start looking at how do we focus the direction on the established TOs that have done the work and things, as opposed to looking for the cheap alternative. But in terms of trying to streamline it, some people love mobile games and that's where their passion is, and that's good. We need that. Other people love CSGO. Someone else loves FIFA. And it's difficult to try and streamline this. We as a community can't stand up and say this title. I wouldn't want to be able to say that this title is more important than another title. I think every gamer deserves to be heard. But it is difficult because you've got a really, really small player base, and now you've got to find a way for all those games to get a little bit of love and attention. So it is difficult. I don't know if there is, to answer your question, the short answer is I don't know if that's the solution or how we do it, basically. That's what I should have said at the beginning, hey?
No, but I think that's definitely the context you give is an important one. And I think it's good to have those kind of discussions, and also just to tell those hard truths that we don't sometimes want to discuss, because the answer is we don't always have the answers, and we are still figuring out our way. And Kwesi, I think on your side, I mean, again, it's also very difficult to look outside of our borders within South Africa and look at what the rest of Africa is doing. But, I often see a lot of things that are happening, and I'm starting to engage more with people and the communities outside of South Africa, within Africa, though, that are doing esports. What is the landscape like on your side of the world? I mean, what are the challenges that you seem to be facing as you grow the esports scene there?
Yeah, I think Sam said a little bit of that. I mean, there's too many tournament organizers in the space, right? So and the player base is a bit smaller. But how you will talk about how to grow the space. But on our side of let me use West Coast, let's say the Western Africa side, which also apply to a little bit in the Eastern Africa side. Tournament esports is not really understood, right? It's not, it hasn't really gotten into the minds of, let's say, leadership, parents, and then the school system. So many people who are engaged in esports on our side are private entity or individuals who have the passion for gaming, and they want to see it grow. So they are in there spending their own hard-earned cash, and most of us are not even into the full stream doing this full time. Let's say we have businesses we are running esports, but it's not up to, let's say, a full time with full 10 staff, office space. You get it. The maximum you will get is probably will be a gaming arena or a center or a cafe or something like that, right? Which probably may have come up as a result of, let's say, hey, it was an internet cafe, then esports came in. Okay, then let's do game in a cafe. So, but when we go to the root of esports in our side, most of the slums or communities have gaming centers. I won't call them esports, but because their model of business is a bit different, right? I would describe much more of an esports hub as much more community oriented, has much more a program. They have a a program they are following. They are making sure they are bringing people in more economical. But on the gaming centers, we have probably 3 to 4 consoles, PlayStation, and even not modernized current generation places. You will find 2 PS2, 1 Xbox 360, then 1 PS4.
Yeah,
You get it. And this is, you could find these kinds of centers scattered all around, and they are in every little community that you go there. And two, the culture of getting to understand that gaming is not accepted in outside of the world, especially in Africa. I believe that parents have a little understanding of gaming, and then transforming that gaming experience into esports. You get it? Like the commerciality of esports, the content creation of esports, the management system or the tournament system, they don't understand. And that is also a problem that we face even with government. I can tell you a story that I went into. A government official told him, hey, I mean, we're trying to build an esports ecosystem here. So we needed the government to understand. We presented a document, and this is a big, I won't mention it. He went like, are you guys doing gambling? I said, no, sir, we're not into gambling. This is not gambling. Okay, are you guys doing Sakawa? Sakawa is a Nigerian term for 419 or fraud. He said, you guys you guys are into internet fraud. I said, no, sir, this is esports. Wow. You get it. So up to the government side, they have no clue. South Africa, I understand, is open because they get to understand that, okay, this is a culture, right, that is building up. So we need to, you are pushing it into the education sector. You're making sure that all the rules and regulations are in there. But in our space, nobody. I mean, I could talk about 5 friends of mine who are heads of esports in other African countries, Senegal, Togo, Guinea, and we share the same experiences, trying to banging on the doors of government, trying to open. Hey, look at what is happening in South Korea. Look at what is happening in US. Look at what is happening in South Africa, and they go like, they haven't heard, and for a government official to tell me, oh, what are you talking about? That thing that I bought as a gift for my kid at home, right? We are console-based region. For most parts of Africa, we dwell on console. Console is the topmost platform that we play on, and much more PlayStation. No, so this high official guy, his smaller niece or kid says, Daddy, I want a PlayStation as a gift for me as a Christmas. He buys that for him. He has no idea. His child plays on the console almost all the time. So he doesn't consider that. It's much more as an entertainment piece or as a privilege for the kid than as an experience that transforms into something else. They have no clue what is happening. So when it comes to, for us in that space, we have a lot of gaming centers that are running, and these gaming centers are seen as a bad boys hood for dropout, Again,
that's really interesting. That's really interesting that you bring up the gaming center, because I think that's a conversation that, and it's so interesting because the problems that you're actually mentioning, I think, are things that we also feel here. I don't think we have in South Africa all of that government support, really. And I think there's still a long way to go. So the frustration that you share, I think, are definitely things that we see on our side. It may look a little different, and we maybe seem a little further along the way in the terms of that conversation. But I definitely think there's a shared frustration and obstacles there. But I want to bring it back to the point around the gaming centers, because I think, we talk about, cool, we are in a place where there's a lot of work that still needs to be done. We have small player bases, we have frustration with the government, but it's all about, like, what do we do to help grow that and move on from that? And I think one of the conversations we used to have here in South Africa was around gaming centers and internet cafes. And Sam, you've mentioned, overseas, that is a culture that they have. People have gaming centers that help lower that barrier to access, that we talk about quite often. Nick, I mean, I'll bring it to you first. Do you think gaming centers and that tech cafe space. Do you think that's still a viable option here? If not, why not? If so, why? Do you think it's still an option to look into?
I think yes and no. I know that sounds a bit weird, but let me explain. So I think when it comes down to the gaming spaces, the reason why, we take a look at South Korea, we take a look at North America in terms of why esports started to grow so well there, was PC banks in South Korea. It started to build an internal rivalry between these regions. That spread it even further. So we started to see those areas basically develop their own stories as well inside those spaces. Same kind of thing in America in arcades. I do apologize if you guys are going to hear some background noise.
This is the life of online. So,
okay. So I think they act as a great access point and a viewability point for people to be able to come in and see what is going on. And please, guys, if that is probably very loud in the background. Do you mind if I just take 2 seconds to get that sorted out?
No, you go sort out the family. Sam, I'll leave it to you. I think you're muted.
I was going to say, Nick over there, it was like a live audience cheering for him. I was enjoying it. It felt like we were in a real space. I think I have quite a controversial opinion on gaming cafes. So obviously being overseas, I saw them. So one, the first thing is the weather, because it's freezing cold there. So there's nothing else to do. In South Africa, we have an outdoor culture. We're out all the time. We're having the best time. Yeah. So being inside is always, it's not something we're not going to go sit and do. But the one thing that we don't discuss is the cost, because the truth of it is, and this is the thing, we were chatting about governments earlier, but this is the truth of it. It's PCs are expensive, consoles are expensive, data is expensive. So gaming cafes are great if they were affordable to youngsters, because this is something I saw in Europe, is that it costs like €3 and you could spend the whole night there. And then there was public transport, which is something else we struggle with, where these kids would come in. And I remember because I was working in one of them at the time, where they would come in at 4 PM, they'd catch the train, they'd get there at 4 PM, they'd play till 1 AM when the cafe shut down, and they'd get on a train and they'd go home. We don't have that. We either don't have the transport, or we have to have a parent driving someone backwards and forwards. And in the communities where these gaming cafes are so desperately needed, there isn't that. There isn't the option of public transport. And more importantly, the thing that I've seen is we've seen a lot of these gaming cafes pop up, but they're really expensive. So the cost of going to a gaming cafe, the only people who can actually afford to go and play there are people that probably already have consoles and PCs at home. So I think that's the biggest problem. And again, it always comes back to the same conversation, and it's one that I don't have the answer to, is how do we lower the cost of data, of access to internet? How do we get more access? I live in what's considered quite an upmarket area in Joburg, and I still can't get mobile signal in my lounge. So how are we going to find a way to break that gap? And again, gaming cafes, I think if they were in the right spaces where they were easily accessible, but at the end of the day, they cost a lot of money to run. The cost of getting into a gaming cafe in South Africa means the only people, like I said, who can access it can already afford a PC at home. Therefore, they're not coming. We've seen it time and again, they pop up, and in a few years they close down. However, saying all that, if we could have a space where it was actually affordable, where it was 10 Rand and you could spend the whole day playing, I think we would change the game completely.
Yeah.
Next, to see you back. Oh, no, please, Kwesi, go.
No, next Nick goes. Nick has spoken.
By all means. Just touching on the back end of that conversation, I think Sam is 100% right there, that it just costs too much to go to one of these venues, just from a transport. If we really want to go into the South African side of things, transport's very expensive to do safely, and also just to get around in terms of time-wise. And I think in terms of being able to get into these spaces, this would be an ideal sort of situation, is that if we go from a governmental level or an investor or whoever that is, take a facility in a township or into a rural area, be able to provide an education structure around that at a base level, esports or gaming on top of that as a recreational level where you're going to be able to pay minimal entry costs. Once again, I think one of the countries that I saw, I'm not too sure, I want to say India, but I'm not too sure, to be honest. There's a fighting game scene that they started to get popped up there, but it was very, very inexpensive in these environments to be able to play. It created a community where people were getting off the streets playing in those environments. So it was really good for that community because they started to build more conversational elements across of that, and it was taking a lot of their time away from who knows what kids are going to get up to at a young age when you just left out on the streets. So if you're able to build in these elements, which was very important in terms of education, needs to be tied to esports if possible, because I think there's still a big stigma with, to be honest, people that don't or can't afford PCs or don't even know what a PC is in a lot of ways to learn. How are you going to tell people to play esports on that when they don't even know the basic functionality of knowing how to use a keyboard or knowing how to be able to put those elements together? I think that's where PCs need to be in terms of being able to grow that out in terms of a LAN environment. But once again, we revert to accessibility. So this is where I'd say no. If we get more accessibility, we don't necessarily need those areas as much, because then we've got accessibility from internet, and that will increase the player base because they've got their mobile device, they've got a way to connect. And hopefully even, hey, if there's 8 friends that have mobile devices, they can start to let those out in that area to be able to say, hey, you want to be able to play a 4v4 with us or whatever it is. And it can start to grow those environments economically as well. So yes, but they need to be situated correctly. Alternatively, they need a very solid functional plan to make sure that they're going to incorporate schools, take that strain off of them to build their own facilities and try to incorporate them in terms of a long-term project to say, we need to fill this space out no matter what, because there's nothing more heartbreaking, and I've seen it time and time again with gaming facilities. You see 20 PCs, 30 PCs idling. And what do you do at that point? Is that you're going, I could have taken this somewhere. And if it was a mobile center, you could take that to a township. You could take that to a school. You could take that to a university. But they're just sitting there collecting dust. And I think that needs to be bared in mind, is that you either need to grab people by their hands and say, look here, this is what we have. This is a gaming setup. This is how you play. Or you need to take them to it, or you need to provide it just so it seems just, why wouldn't I? It's going to cost me 10 Rand, like Sam said, for the day. I'm going to go hang out with my friends. Let's make that a cultural experience, because it doesn't necessarily make sense to me financially at this moment, doing these massive high-end PCs and being able to say, hey, come in because you're going to be an esports pro. There are no esports pros.
Okay, so I think Nick has said something, but I just want to make this statement, and this has to really get to understand by everybody. The reality of esports differ from region to region, differ from city to city, to community. You see, we have to understand that the building blocks of esports is tied with the culture of the people where they live in. Even for Ghana, or when I take Accra, right, which is the capital city, right, esports differ from one town to another. It's differ from one city to another. How the players come together to play, how the kind of games they play, all right. If it is mobile, if it is console, it differs. And what has thrived in the olden days, probably, I understand the big, for us, we don't have the big internet cafes, right?
Yeah.
The local gaming centers, they are not even hooked online. That's amazing thing. So it's community oriented based that they go there to play. Now we have higher internet costs. Let's say a PS4 console costs about $400. That is a semester school fees for a kid. Yeah. And a parent going to spend that money, $400. I don't know. You understand? So
for sure.
Well, we're trying to build that culture. For us, Ghana Esports, what we've done is to link up with all these small gaming centers in different communities and say, hey, look, we're trying to build something here. and we come in to give you support as to build your business and also make it accessible and also regulate the kind of games that kids come there. So there are times kids come there. There are times that you don't allow kids come there. There are rules and regulations. Once you come under us, we give you the rules and regulations as to, and also bring out what we call the awareness program in the community, able to build programs, educational programs that helps the kids in the community, right? So it's not all about gaming. How do you bring them? If because kids are fascinated by screens and color and beautiful things on screens, they want to touch, they want to play, right? So once this look, we use a term called read to play, whereby kids have to read books before they get a chance to play. Because once we come and set up, we go to a community and set up this nice, beautiful TV screens with console. They see all the games, they rush there. Hey, I want to play, I want to play. Then we tell them, you want to play, go and read a book.
Read a book first.
Read a chapter of a book.
That's
and
awesome.
You have a volunteer, a teacher volunteer that helps you even if you can't read. There are puzzles, not only reading, there are puzzles. There are kids like 4 years who can read, they have to do color shades and they get a chance to play video games and they want to do that again to come and play another session of a game, maybe for 10 minutes or 15 minutes. So that kind of a program we try to roll out. And guess what? Schools are now calling us to come as their extracurricular activity for the students in the schools. Because what? Now parents are saying, okay, I'm adopting the same principle in my home. If you want to watch a cartoon, you read a chapter of a book, or you do this kind of a homework. Have you done your homework? You've not done your homework, go and do your homework. You get 30 minutes to watch a cartoon or Cartoon Network or Disney Channel.
And what I love, what I love about that as well is looking at the kids. And I think going back to the point that we made a few times as well is like, how do you actually get schools more involved and kind of look at that grassroots level? Because I think, again, going right back to Sam's point of how small player bases are, that's how you start to grow that base, is when you actually invest at the beginning, at the early stages, when you're investing in schools. And Kwesi, to your point, right, it's about finding a way to bring in gaming in a positive way. And I think, there's often a lot of stigma, and I think with parents, it happens very often. And I think we still see it, there was a story that happened on, broke on Twitter where a player had to give up playing at a competitive level for temporarily because the parents were just going, it's not going to be working for you, until people can step in and try to show them there is something here and there is a positive way to bring gaming and esports into the fold and into schools and into kids in a way that actually changes them for the better, and not this this outdated thinking that we constantly still have to struggle with in terms of gaming as a sort of secluded, isolated, weird thing. And again, not to say that there's a ton of career options here. We're still growing the scene, but there's definitely a lot of positive impact that can be made. And I think you've all sort of brought that up. I think we have got about 10 minutes left, and I want to obviously leave some time for questions if there are any. I think if you have any questions, if you're watching, I think there's a chat that you can put it in. I think the guy will send it to us our way. But I think we're here for business of gaming as well, so I want to bring it to a brand side, to talk around that. And Sam, I'll start with you. I think that's something that you've played quite a bit of. You've been in that space quite a bit of getting brands involved and getting into gaming. And I mean, even now, I think you recently just did a thing with the Toyota around FIFA. So what are your views? I mean, I know it's quite a broad question. I mean, we could talk about it for 3 hours at a time, but I think in short, with brands and esports and gaming, how do we start to bring that more into a way that's more sustainable?
So I think that the first thing that we have to do is be honest. That's the first thing. So the truth of it is, we've chatted about it here. There's an accessibility problem. You're not getting you are getting a diverse audience if you know how to find them, but it's a small audience. So be honest. I think we have to stop selling this dream where we go, you can get 15,000 people. Be like, listen, it's a small group. If you're choosing to do this on PC, it's a small group with money, which brands like. Let's be honest. It's not great. It's not diverse. It's not big. But you know what? They've got money. So if you want to sell your expensive product, they're the place to go. Sort of look at that and go, okay, cool, this is what you're looking at. Gamers, figure out who they are. Even gamers on console, they are super smart. They're online, they're very engaged. This is the audience you want. So the first is figuring out who you're selling to them, because I think right now we get that wrong. And the second thing is just delivering. I think one of the things that Toyota did that is doing really well now, because they've actually got their WRC, they're doing a rally thing where they've tied in the brand itself into it, is the entertainment value. And I think that that's really important. We saw they did it the first one last week, and it got so much feedback from people just having fun watching it. They understood that it needed to maybe be an entertainment type vibe. And I know Nick worked on that behind the scenes as well with some of the way it was presented. And I think that that's really, really important, is understanding if we want brands to come in, give them something entertaining, be honest about who you're selling to, and explain that, yes, you know what, it is a small base. We're working on it, but we can't expect a brand to come in and give us lots of money to do something that gets them no return. So we have to be a little bit more honest, where we say, you know what, if you want to sell your 20,000 Rand part for a PC, here's your guys. It's small, it's not diverse. You can't tick all these boxes. You're going to have to tick, what do you want to do? Do you want to sell? Go there. If you want to reach a bigger audience, be more diverse, encourage more people to join. Then the Toyota FIFA tournament was a great way that they did that, where they got the crowd in. So we have to learn to sell better. I think that's what it comes down to. It's a horrible thing to say, but we have to determine what it is we're selling, who we're selling to, and what it is that they actually want. I think sometimes we don't ask those questions. That's a very controversial opinion, though. So I don't know.
No, I think it's true. It's true. It's perfectly true. Brands sometimes get into I speak to telcos coming in and they want to see numbers, right? And I'm saying, this is an emerging space in our space, and you can't really pinpoint all the numbers. If you want to sell expensive stuff to you, want to spend to those who can buy, right? And these are youngsters who can't buy. They are living on their parents' money, and you want to sell a bigger, expensive stuff to them. We've been trying to get the telcos even to lower data prices, okay, for gamers here, and it gets so. It's true what Sam is saying.
Yeah, I think also just further from that is that the brands need to really identify their goals. And hopefully the person that they're dealing with, or people that they're dealing with, are telling them what goals are attainable and what isn't attainable. I think further from that, once again, leaning on that honesty conversation is going to be very important. And being able to try also, when I say identify those goals, is that, once again, this leans on, hey, do we want to do a short term, just have some fun with it? By all means, then let's have some fun with it. Let's do something cool. But if it's long-term and it's trying to build then that identity, because if you're looking at what the growth curve for esports is going to be like in the future, we're on a good curve at the moment in terms of just being able to see a player-based registering, being a part of these things. These are becoming a little bit more accessible across the board with more time. And that's where brands are going to get the biggest value. And I think, once again, that ties into, where are your goals of your brand? What are you looking to achieve? If it is just to have some fun, let's have some fun. But at the same time, let's see if we can tie it into something that really does something to support the community as a whole. So yeah, just define those goals would be my key message to brands.
Yeah,
I think that's a really great point, talking about your goals and knowing what the goals are, and also the honesty part of it. I think that's something that we don't often, or I think we're starting to be a little bit more serious about and a little bit more honest with. I think we've been in the scene long enough to have seen when things were going, and seeing those pitch decks that would sometimes come out, and the stats that people were talking about, and the interviews that, people were just selling a story and selling a really big dream. And for me, my red flag whenever I see a presentation is always if they only quote the US numbers and then go straight into what their idea is. I'm like, guys, let's bring it back to the honesty point. But I think also, Nick, a really great point is around, know what your goals are. If you're a brand that just wants to come in quickly, you want to do a flash sale for your product and you want to get the word out there, cool. Then create something that does that job. If you're looking to do something more long-term and really come into the scene and invest in the scene, and with the gamble, we're taking the bet of saying in the future it's going to really pay off, then you have to take a very different approach. So I think that goals defining thing, and I think it always goes back to a conversation we haven't before around, ROI. I think that's also a conversation that doesn't often get spoken about, where we don't really talk about what the ROIs are. And it's really hard to set a benchmark, because it's also a thing that we don't really have a discussion around, in general. So I think there's a lot of nuances and a lot of honesty and clarity that we need to have as we approach brands and get them involved in the scene. So I think, look, we're coming to a close. I don't know if anyone has any final thoughts I do want to add. Kwesi, I'll start with you. If you want to add one last thought before we wrap up the segment.
Well, I think that Sam said it earlier that there's a lot of fragmentation within the Africa space, but Africa's biggest opportunity is in the number of youth that is coming up. Okay, we have the youngest youth in the world. Mobile penetration is also coming up very strongly, so meaning that mobile esports will become very big in the next steps. We have technology that are being developed across the region, right? So collaboration across the countries will become very big for us, and I hope that we could look into collaborating from country to country so that Africa on its own can develop its own ecosystem. Also, Sam also made a comment that we need to grow our own kind of esports, whereby it is not the same as it is in Asia. It's not the same as it is in Europe. I mean, look at our culture. Look at where we can bridge the gap, and especially create experiential stuff. For instance, Sam, if there an AGL tournament where you bring people, and after the tournament you take them to safari park, we have Africa apart from the digital world. Why can't we explore a little bit more and see other experiential stuff that we can, right? We can't do so much. Is it food that you want? Imagine if you bring a tournament and you bring in people from Korea, North America, and all of them are coming and experiencing the beauty of South Africa. So you're not just come into an esports tournament, but you're also experiencing it. I think that COVID has pushed us into our shell, but I believe that in the years to come, when everything settles down, esports in Africa will be very big.
Thank you. Sam, to you, final thoughts?
I'm gonna do this really quickly so that Nick has some time to speak. I think my first thing that I always want to say, I'm doing my little teacher lecture here. Number one, if you are in esports, we need to stop relying on this belief that a brand is going to come in and save the day. We constantly are being like, we just need money. We need these brands to come and stop that. Every single time, if you look back in the history of how esports grew, it was the community that did it. We should be doing this. We need to stop waiting for these saviors. We need to stop waiting for money and being like, well, we just need this money. That's not what needs to happen. I think we as a community need to grow this ourselves, and that's the only way it's going to grow. That's how it's happened everywhere else. And then finally, if you are a brand coming in, you need to start listening. I think Nick said it, and this is a tough one. I see so many brands who come in and tell us how to do it, how they believe it should be done. They don't listen. And when they meet someone who's actually been in the scene, or a business like ACGL that's been in the scene forever, who tells them, actually, this is more realistic, they simply go, no, I don't like what you said. I'll go somewhere else where this brand agrees with me, or this company agrees. As brands, you need to realize that you can't control the space, and it really is worthwhile to listen to what the community is saying and find a way to work with the community. That's the only way we grow right now. So yeah, that's my last little lecture. Now I'm done.
Thank you, Sam. Nick, over to you.
I think from my side, let me just start off say thank you everybody for the chat. I really have enjoyed it here today. Furthermore from that, I think the African journey, I've always highlighted this when it comes down to an international side, is that the African side just gets left out in tournaments that even get called the worldwide, whatever it is. Africa is the dark continent that gets left off. And it's not going to be a reliance thing on us looking over to Europe or to North America or to South America, to Australia to give us that assistance. What we really need to do is try to build that internally, as Kwesi also alluded to a little bit earlier. We need to connect Africa. We need to make sure that we're sustaining that conversation, building this into a structural level, so esports can really turn on those lights to say, hey, we can't ignore Africa anymore. That will come with time, and it really comes with experience as well, and making sure that you're doing your due diligence to be able to support those that you believe can make change as well. And for us to be able to have honest conversations is always going to be important. And I also implore anybody that is in the space to have honest conversations with those that are available. So I think that's where I'm going to leave it. And also I've got a big shout out and big love to, of course, the ACGL family that's been doing stuff on my side. So thanks for that, guys. And also thank you, Glenn and Comic-Con, for putting on this discussion. I really, really, really do appreciate it.
No, really, thank
Right.
you very much, all of you, for taking the time to chat to us this morning. I think there's more panels coming up next. Guys, so this is Business of Gaming. This was esports, the good, the bad, and the ugly. Thank you very much for watching, guys. Stay tuned. There's definitely more action coming your way. And to the guests on this panel, thank you very much for chatting.